In the quiet folds of rural Pennsylvania, where the fog rolls in like a secret too heavy to speak, stood the Folling house, a place that locals swore was both alive and listening. From the outside, it looked like any other worn farmhouse, chipped paint, wind-chimed porch, and the faint scent of applewood drifting from the hearth. But behind those walls lived a family that defied all sense of reason, 12 children, none of whom had ever been born, at least not on paper. No birth certificates. No hospital records. Not a single trace of where they came from. The Follings said they were saving children who had been forgotten by the world, yet over time, it became clear that something else was happening inside that house. The laughter that once spilled from the windows turned hollow, and the lights flickered long after midnight. By the time anyone dared to ask questions, the truth had already rotted beneath layers of secrecy, and what they uncovered about the Follings would chill even the most skeptical soul. Because some families are built on love, and others, on lies too dark to name. Setting a chilling, atmospheric tone is the foundation of any dark historical narrative, and it's more than just using grim or eerie words, it's about constructing a mood that seeps into the listener's imagination before the facts even unfold. When telling a story like that of the Follings, who adopted 12 children without a single birth certificate, the tone acts as an invisible guide, preparing the audience for unease and suspicion long before they understand why they should feel it. The atmosphere should feel like fog settling over the truth, heavy, obscuring, and impossible to ignore. It's the careful balance between quiet dread and restrained curiosity that makes the listener lean in, drawn not by what's said, but by what's left unsaid. In dark storytelling, tone is not simply descriptive, it's psychological. Every sentence should pulse with tension, every pause should carry weight. The setting might appear ordinary at first glance, a farmhouse, a small town, a family portrait, but the tone transforms these ordinary details into something uncanny. The creak of a wooden floor, the ticking of an old clock, or the way a curtain moves in a still room all become signals of something lurking just beneath normalcy. By crafting a tone that is quiet yet suffocating, the storyteller mirrors the nature of the secrets being revealed. The listener should feel as though they've stepped into a forgotten place, one where time and morality are distorted. The tone must also establish trust. Even though the story is drenched in darkness, the audience should sense that they are in safe hands, guided by a narrator who knows the horror but won't exploit it. This creates a strange comfort within discomfort, the same kind that makes people watch true crime documentaries or listen to haunted history tales. The goal is not to shock, but to mesmerize. The horror lies not in gore or violence, but in the quiet realization that something deeply unnatural has been accepted as normal. The tone whispers rather than shouts, and in that whisper, the truth feels colder. Through language and pacing, the chilling tone sets the stage for the revelations to come. It primes the senses, the dim light of memory, the rustle of old records, the echo of names no one remembers. It's the art of creating a world where silence feels dangerous and innocence feels staged. By the time the factual elements of the story begin to surface, the tone has already done its work. The audience doesn't just understand that something is wrong, they feel it in their bones, as though they've stepped into the Folling house themselves, and the air has suddenly turned still. But what if the silence itself was a clue? What happens when a family's greatest act of charity begins to look like their darkest secret? The mystery of the Folling house wasn't just about the children who were there, it was about the ones who never existed at all. Beginning with a mysterious statement or question is one of the most powerful ways to seize attention in a dark historical narrative. It serves as a psychological hook, immediately inviting curiosity while planting unease in the listener's mind. A single, well-crafted opening line can blur the boundary between fact and legend, forcing the audience to question what they think they know. In stories steeped in secrecy like that of the Follings, who adopted 12 children without a trace of their origins, mystery is not just an element of the story, it is the oxygen that sustains it. The opening must suggest that something terrible has already happened, or worse, that something terrible is still happening, quietly and unnoticed. It draws the audience in with a whisper rather than a scream, provoking thought before delivering information. When crafting this kind of opening, tone and phrasing work together to establish tension immediately. A question such as "How does a family adopt 12 children who never officially existed?" lingers in the listener's mind longer than any direct statement could. It doesn't give away answers, but instead creates an intellectual vacuum that demands to be filled. The listener's imagination rushes in to supply possibilities, and in doing so, they become emotionally invested before the first fact is revealed. This technique leverages human nature's obsession with the unknown. Curiosity and fear stem from the same part of the mind, and when they collide, they produce fascination, the exact feeling a dark historical story seeks to evoke. The mysterious opening also sets the narrative's rhythm. It slows time, allowing the storyteller to build suspense gradually. Instead of rushing to exposition, the story lingers in atmosphere and implication. Each word feels weighted, as though it might carry a clue. The first few sentences are not about information but about tone, evoking sensations of discomfort and intrigue. The goal is to make the audience lean forward, waiting for the revelation they sense is coming but cannot yet see. The storyteller uses ambiguity as a form of control, revealing enough to spark emotion, yet withholding enough to deepen the mystery. In a tale like The Follings, this approach transforms a story about missing documents into something far more haunting. It asks the listener not only to wonder who these children were but why no one questioned their existence until it was too late. The opening line becomes the thread that unravels everything that follows, and the mystery it poses is not just about the family, it's about the darkness that thrives when silence is left unexplored. Introducing the Folling family as seemingly ordinary but with unsettling undertones is essential to building the tension that defines dark storytelling. Every haunting tale begins with normalcy, the calm before the truth distorts it. The Follings should be presented as a picture of small-town perfection, a family that fits neatly into their surroundings. They attend church on Sundays, wave to neighbors, and keep their yard tidy. On the surface, there's nothing remarkable about them, and that's exactly what makes them intriguing. The contrast between their apparent innocence and the darkness that hides beneath it creates the psychological tension that pulls the audience in. The listener is invited to see them as any other family, which makes the eventual unraveling of their secret feel all the more chilling. The key lies in subtlety. The unsettling undertones must creep in like a cold draft through a locked window. Maybe the Follings never seem to age in the old photographs. Maybe the children are always seen together, yet never heard speaking to anyone outside the home. Perhaps the mother smiles too long when she talks about them, or the father's eyes linger on strangers for a beat too long. None of these details shout danger, they whisper it. This approach mirrors real life, where evil often hides behind polite manners and practiced smiles. The unease should feel familiar, not supernatural. The discomfort comes from recognizing that something is off without being able to name what it is. By first painting the Follings as perfectly normal, the storyteller gains control over the listener's expectations. Audiences are conditioned to trust patterns, the warmth of family, the safety of routine, and when that trust is betrayed, it creates an emotional jolt. The realization that something terrible could grow within something so ordinary forces the listener to question their own perceptions of what's safe. It transforms curiosity into dread. The more ordinary the Follings appear at first, the more horrifying it becomes when their facade begins to crack. This slow exposure of hidden darkness also mirrors the way truth reveals itself in real history. Communities rarely recognize evil while it's happening. It's only after years of quiet suspicion and hindsight that the pattern becomes clear. In the Follings case, the lack of birth certificates might seem like a clerical error at first, until the details begin to twist into something that defies logic. By introducing them as a normal family and then letting the unease spread gradually, the story captures the creeping realization that some horrors don't arrive with fanfare, they live next door, waving politely every morning, hiding secrets that only the dark will tell. And in a town where everyone knows everyone else's business, how does a secret this large stay hidden for so long? The answer lies not in the family, but in the fearful silence of the town itself, a silence that would eventually become its own kind of confession. Mentioning the setting, an isolated town or rural community, is a crucial step in shaping the psychological landscape of a dark historical story. The environment becomes more than a backdrop, it acts as a silent accomplice to the events that unfold. A place tucked far from the noise of the modern world carries an innate eeriness, where secrets can linger unchallenged and whispers become truth. In stories like that of the Follings, the rural setting creates a sense of containment. The world feels smaller, closed off, and suffocating, where every sound echoes longer than it should and every unasked question becomes a weight in the air. Isolation magnifies the horror because there's nowhere else for the story to go, the evil has nowhere to hide, yet no one around to expose it. A rural community also adds layers of social and psychological realism. In such towns, everyone knows everyone, or at least believes they do. Reputation and appearance are currencies, and outsiders are rarely trusted. The Follings' quiet lifestyle, their brood of children, and their self-sufficiency might initially appear admirable in such a setting. The locals might admire their work ethic or their devotion, brushing off inconsistencies as quirks rather than warning signs. In this way, the isolation doesn't just exist geographically, it manifests socially and morally. People become complicit through silence, their unwillingness to confront discomfort allowing the darkness to grow unchecked. The physical details of the setting also serve to deepen the unease. The long stretches of road bordered by skeletal trees, the hollow sound of wind against a decaying barn, the faint glow of the Folling house at the edge of a field, these sensory elements do more than paint a picture, they evoke a feeling. The land itself seems to conspire with the family's secrets, as if the soil remembers what the people wish to forget. The rhythm of rural life, quiet mornings, distant thunder, the hum of cicadas, contrasts sharply with the hidden cruelty, emphasizing how horror can thrive under the most peaceful skies. The isolation of the town also mirrors the emotional isolation of the victims and perpetrators. There is no rush of city life to drown out suspicion, no crowds to disappear into. Every lie echoes louder, yet every truth takes longer to surface. The town's remoteness allows the unnatural to feel ordinary, blurring the line between community and complicity. In the story of the Follings, the rural setting doesn't just hold the darkness, it feeds it, providing the stillness and secrecy that allow horror to take root beneath the facade of simplicity and peace. Hinting at the passage of time is one of the most effective techniques in dark storytelling because it allows the narrative to stretch beyond the immediate and seep into history, giving the sense that what happened was not just an isolated event but a wound that lingers. When time is woven subtly into the story, it adds layers of decay, memory, and consequence. The events surrounding the Follings should not feel recent or contained, they should feel like something half-buried, unearthed after decades of silence. The listener should sense that the truth has been waiting in the shadows, gathering dust, becoming something heavier with each passing year. This use of time transforms the story from a mere account of strange events into a haunting legacy, as though the land and the people still carry traces of what happened long ago. Describing the passage of time also evokes atmosphere. The old Folling house might be shown as weathered, its wooden boards warped from years of rain and sun. The family photos might have faded, the smiles blurring at the edges. The town itself may have changed, new families have moved in, the local store closed, the road leading to the property nearly forgotten. Yet despite all this change, something about the place feels untouched, as if time dared not interfere too much with what occurred there. This creates a tension between movement and stillness, suggesting that while life has continued elsewhere, this story remains trapped, unresolved, and festering beneath the surface. Time also deepens the emotional impact by framing how memory distorts and conceals. People forget, misremember, or choose not to recall what unsettles them. When neighbors or townspeople reflect on the Follings years later, their recollections might conflict. One remembers laughter, another swears they heard screams at night. Through this fractured memory, the story gains a dreamlike quality, making it unclear where fact ends and legend begins. That ambiguity keeps the audience suspended in unease, aware that time has both blurred and preserved the horror in equal measure. Using time in this way also serves as quiet commentary on neglect and complicity. The longer something remains unspoken, the more powerful it becomes. By suggesting that decades have passed since the Follings story faded from conversation, the narrative exposes how communities bury what they cannot confront. Dust settles over truth, and silence becomes tradition. The passage of time does not heal, it conceals, distorts, and reshapes the past into something spectral. In the story of the Follings, time itself becomes a haunting presence, not as an enemy but as a witness that refuses to forget what everyone else has tried to erase. But a secret of this magnitude can't stay buried forever. It begins to surface in the smallest of ways: a glance held too long, a story that doesn't add up, a coldness in a home that should be warm. The neighbors were starting to notice, and their whispers would become the first crack in the Follings' perfect facade. Introducing the disturbing detail that the Follings adopted 12 children, none with birth certificates, is the pivot upon which the entire narrative turns. This single fact transforms the story from curious to sinister, from ordinary to unimaginable. In dark storytelling, such a revelation must be handled with precision, not delivered as mere information, but as an unsettling discovery that seeps slowly into the listener's awareness. The absence of birth certificates is more than a legal anomaly, it is a symbol of erasure. It suggests that these children exist in a void, unclaimed by the world, without histories, without names tied to records. It raises questions that claw at the edges of morality. Where did these children come from, and why did no one think to ask sooner? This detail also embodies the central tension between appearance and reality. On the surface, the Follings may have seemed like selfless caretakers, taking in abandoned or forgotten children. In a small, isolated town, such generosity would have been praised. But beneath that kindness lurks something far darker: the complete absence of accountability. The missing documents strip the children of their identity, rendering them invisible to the systems meant to protect them. This erasure transforms the Folling home from a refuge into a void, a place where lives could vanish without trace. Each missing birth certificate becomes a ghost, a silent accusation that lingers in the air long after the truth is buried. The disturbing nature of this fact also lies in how easily it could be overlooked. In earlier decades, especially in rural areas, documentation might not have been strictly enforced, and people often trusted those who appeared upright. The Follings could hide behind this trust, their quiet respectability shielding them from suspicion. This ordinary backdrop makes the revelation of 12 undocumented children feel even more jarring. It violates not just the law, but the unspoken social contract of community oversight. The audience begins to feel complicit, mirroring the townspeople's silence, realizing how horror can thrive not because of malice alone but because of collective indifference. The absence of birth certificates also introduces a haunting sense of displacement. The children's very existence is uncertain, their origins a blank space no one can fill. Without paper trails, their stories become whispers, their identities blurred into myth. This detail transforms the Follings' narrative from a tale of questionable parenting into something existentially chilling, a story about people who lived and disappeared without ever being acknowledged as real. The missing records are not just documents, they are the vanishing point of the story, where humanity fades into the unknown, and silence becomes the only thing that remains. When the neighbors begin to notice strange behavior, the story's tension moves from hidden unease to creeping exposure. This moment marks the shift between private secrecy and public suspicion, when the darkness that once lived quietly within the Folling household begins to leak into the world beyond its walls. In a small rural community, where gossip travels faster than truth, even subtle oddities can echo like thunder. Yet, in the story of the Follings, the neighbors' observations are not dramatic. They are fragmented impressions, fleeting moments that, on their own, seem harmless but, when remembered together, form a portrait of quiet horror. These small, almost mundane observations are what make the narrative so unsettling. The horror does not announce itself, it hums beneath the rhythm of daily life. The strange behavior could manifest in countless ways, each more ambiguous than the last. Perhaps the children were rarely seen in town, always ushered away when visitors came. Maybe they spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward the Folling parents before answering simple questions. Some neighbors might have noticed that the family never celebrated birthdays, or that the children always seemed to wear mismatched clothing, as if handed down from nowhere. The mother might have been polite but distant, the father overly protective, his smiles too measured to feel sincere. Each encounter leaves a residue of discomfort, nothing definitive, but enough to make people whisper after dark. In dark storytelling, these observations are crucial because they ground the horror in realism. The neighbors' accounts become the audience's first external validation that something is wrong, allowing suspicion to grow naturally rather than through exposition. It also mirrors how real tragedies often unfold, not in sudden revelations, but in slow, uneasy patterns that people choose to ignore until it's too late. Fear is diluted through denial. Neighbors convince themselves that they're imagining things, that it's none of their business, that families are entitled to privacy. This moral hesitation becomes a secondary layer of horror, the realization that evil often survives because people prefer not to look too closely. The strange behavior thus acts as both a symptom and a warning. It gives the audience a sense of being on the edge of discovery, trapped between doubt and dread. Every unanswered question, every uneasy glance from the townsfolk, adds weight to the silence surrounding the Follings. The horror becomes communal, no longer confined to one family, but shared by those who saw the signs and chose to look away. Through the neighbors' eyes, the story reveals how darkness rarely hides completely. It flickers in plain sight, disguised as eccentricity, until the truth finally claws its way to the surface. The final, chilling truth of the Folling house was not just in the lies they told, but in the evidence that was never there to begin with. Because how do you prove a crime when the victims were never officially born? The answer lies in the echoes left behind, in the cold stillness of the house and the haunted eyes in a faded photograph. Foreshadowing dark revelations without exposing them too soon is one of the most delicate yet powerful techniques in crafting a story steeped in dread. It's the art of making the audience feel the weight of something terrible long before they understand its shape. In a narrative like the story of the Follings, whose household concealed truths far more disturbing than anyone could imagine, this foreshadowing serves as an invisible thread, guiding the listener through unease without satisfaction, building anticipation through silence rather than spectacle. It transforms the story from a simple retelling of events into an experience of discovery, where every detail feels like a clue and every moment hums with hidden meaning. Effective foreshadowing works through restraint. The storyteller doesn't reveal what happened, but they let the shadow of it linger in every sentence. A creaking door might sound like more than old wood. A line in a newspaper clipping might carry a weight the audience won't fully grasp until later. Even the way people speak about the Follings, the hesitations, the half-finished sentences, the glances exchanged between old neighbors all become quiet signals that something unspoken is festering beneath the surface. The key is to let the audience sense the shape of the horror without ever defining it too early. When handled with care, This approach builds psychological tension more effectively than any outright revelation. Foreshadowing also helps create emotional depth. It allows the audience to develop their own theories, their own fears, as they move through the story. The mind naturally fills in blanks with imagination, and imagination, especially when fed by uncertainty, can conjure horrors greater than anything stated aloud. In the story of the Follings, the audience might begin to suspect that the missing birth certificates hide something unspeakable, but until the truth is revealed, that suspicion festers, twisting each ordinary detail into something sinister. This tension transforms curiosity into anxiety, making the eventual revelation not only shocking but inevitable. Subtle repetition is another powerful form of foreshadowing. A recurring image, perhaps a locked attic door, a certain lullaby, or the sound of distant crying, can create a subconscious connection for the audience. Each time it appears, it carries a slightly different weight, hinting that the meaning behind it is darker than before. This method doesn't just prepare the listener for revelation, it conditions them emotionally to feel dread before the truth is spoken. In the story of the Follings, foreshadowing ensures that when the darkness finally emerges, it feels both surprising and tragically expected, the kind of truth that the audience realizes, deep down, they always knew was coming. Using sensory imagery to describe the coldness of the house, the stillness of the air, and the unsettling quiet of family photographs is what transforms the Follings story from a collection of facts into a living, breathing atmosphere of dread. Sensory imagery doesn't just paint a scene, it makes the audience feel it. The texture of the air, the faint hum of silence, the flicker of dim light, these are the threads that weave the emotional tone of the narrative. In dark storytelling, the senses become instruments of fear, and through them, the setting ceases to be static. The Folling house isn't just a place where strange things happened, it becomes a presence, a character with its own cold pulse and memory. By appealing to touch, sound, sight, and even smell, the storyteller transforms the listener from an observer into a participant, forcing them to inhabit the unease instead of merely hearing about it. The coldness of the house represents more than temperature, it's a reflection of emotional absence, of warmth deliberately withheld. When describing this space, the storyteller might evoke the chill of air that feels heavier than it should, or the way one's breath hangs in the room too long. The silence inside might feel unnatural, as though the walls themselves are holding their breath. This sensory isolation mirrors the moral isolation of the family within. The Follings' home becomes an emotional vacuum, where laughter sounds rehearsed and comfort feels wrong. Every creak of the floorboards becomes suspect, every flicker of light feels like a warning. Visual imagery, particularly around the photographs, adds another layer of unease. Family portraits are supposed to preserve love and belonging, yet here they feel accusatory. The faces in the frames might be too still, their smiles too identical, the backgrounds always the same, as though time itself has frozen inside the glass. Perhaps the photographs are dusted regularly, but no one ever sees new ones added. The listener begins to imagine the eerie perfection of these images and the absence of life they represent. Each sensory detail amplifies the tension, making the horror not about what is seen, but what is felt in the spaces between. Smell and sound also play subtle roles in dark storytelling. The faint scent of old wood and mildew, the persistent ticking of a clock, the soft rustle of something unseen, these details draw the listener deeper into the atmosphere of decay. By layering these sensations, the story becomes immersive, pulling the audience into a world where the ordinary feels corrupted. Through sensory imagery, the Folling house becomes a vessel of memory and silence, holding its secrets not in words but in the chill that seeps through the air and the emptiness that hums beneath it. Ending the introduction with a haunting, unresolved question gives the story its lingering power, the kind that echoes long after the final line is spoken. In dark storytelling, closure is the enemy of fear. The most unsettling tales do not end neatly, they leave a hollow space for the imagination to occupy. When the story of the Follings is introduced, the audience should not feel relief when the introduction concludes, they should feel suspended, uncertain, and uneasy. A haunting question does not merely invite curiosity, it burdens the listener with the sense that some answers are too dreadful to uncover. It acts as a psychological hook, pulling them deeper into the mystery, ensuring they can't walk away without needing to know what really happened inside that house. The question itself must emerge naturally from the tone and rhythm of the story. It can't sound forced or dramatic for its own sake. It should feel like the only possible thought that could linger after such an introduction, something quiet, simple, but heavy with implication. Instead of asking, "What happened to the children?" a more haunting question might be, "Were they ever meant to be found?" Or "How do 12 lives disappear without anyone noticing?" The strength of these questions lies in their restraint. They do not demand an immediate answer, they whisper to the listener's conscience, forcing them to think about complicity, ignorance, and the cost of silence. Ending with a question also humanizes the horror. It shifts the story from being about them to being about us. The listener becomes part of the narrative, drawn into the moral and emotional implications of the story. A haunting question transforms a historical account into an experience that challenges the audience's perception of right and wrong. In the story of the Follings, this question acts as both an echo of the past and a mirror to the present. It reminds the listener that the darkness described isn't confined to that house or that time, it's something that can exist anywhere, in any family, in any community that chooses not to look too closely. The unresolved nature of the question ensures the story never truly ends. Even after the introduction fades, the listener's mind continues to circle back, trying to fill in the silence left behind. This is the essence of dark storytelling, to leave something unfinished, to allow unease to take root. By ending with a haunting question, the story of the Follings achieves its true purpose. It becomes not just a tale of what happened, but a reminder of how easily horror hides in the spaces we choose not to examine. As the shadows of this unsolved mystery fade into the past, the secrets of history await you. Subscribe now to Secrets of History, and join us as we unearth more chilling tales from the abyss of time. Hit that bell icon, and let the past whisper its truths to you next time.